Welcome to another Photography Simplified video. My name is Chris, and in these videos, I do my best to simplify digital photography for you with the goal of helping you to get out and take great photos. In today's video, we're talking all about image file types. You may have heard the terms JPEG or RAW and want to know which to shoot in. Well, today we're going to answer that question. Let's get into it. Well, the first thing that you need to understand is that there is a difference between RAW and JPEG image files. And you'll probably wonder, when should I shoot which? And the answer is that it depends. By the way, if this video is helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing so that you can see my other beginner tutorials as well. Now, let's get into the differences between JPEG and RAW files and the pros and cons of each. Let's start with JPEG. JPEGs are typically smaller file sizes because the data is compressed. A JPEG image is processed, meaning it's just made a little bit prettier and finalized in a way. JPEGs always have the .jpeg file extension, so you know when you're looking at an image that ends in that, as far as the file name goes, you're looking at a JPEG. And they can come in different sizes. You could have large JPEGs or small or medium. Some of the pros of JPEG image files are that they are smaller because they're compressed, which means they don't take up as much space. Your computer, your hard drives, they're not going to get full as fast. They're easier to send, that type of thing, because they have smaller file sizes. And the editing is done to the image for you, that they're made a little bit prettier. Now, you can still edit a JPEG image and tweak it, but it's not going to come out just completely flat. There's a little bit of work done to it to make it slightly prettier. And that can be a pro for JPEG files. Another thing is that they're easy to open and share. They're more universal. Almost any program or device can look at a JPEG image. Now, some of the cons of JPEGs are that they're not great for editing. Because they're already tweaked a little bit to be made prettier, it's harder to do some types of edits to your JPEG files, and we'll look at some of those examples later, such as things like the white balance is fixed, which is a con of a JPEG image, and they're harder to save. If you have some brighter, a little bit overexposed areas or some underexposed areas, those are harder to save in post-processing when you edit your photo if you're editing a JPEG. Now let's go over RAW files. RAW files have bigger file sizes because we're capturing the full data. It's keeping all kinds of data on that image. They can have different file extensions when you look at the file name for a RAW file, and usually it'll depend on the brand. For instance, a Canon RAW file might be .cr2 and a Nikon .nef and so on. So if you see a kind of weird file ending, that's more likely it's a RAW file. And RAW files, just like JPEGs, can come in different sizes or qualities, small, medium, large, etc. Now let's go over the pros and cons of RAW files. Some of the pros are that they store all the data. You get everything with a RAW file, which is great if you plan on editing your photos. Also, RAW files are easier to save when you're editing. If you do have an area that is slightly overexposed or underexposed, because more data and all of it is being captured, it's more likely that when you edit, you can save some difficult areas of your image. And with RAW files, you're able to adjust the white balance when you're editing. However, some of the cons of RAW files are that because they're storing all the data, they're much larger file sizes. It requires more storage. Your computer is going to get full quicker. Your hard drives, it can end up costing money to be able to store all those big file sizes. And another con of RAW files is that you need specific software to view and edit them. Not every single program or device can just open a RAW file and view it. Likely, in a lot of situations, you'll need to export a RAW file to a JPEG before it's as universal and able to open and see on all the different devices. The good news is that most editing softwares can open and view a RAW file, allowing you to edit it. If you're finding this content helpful, by the way, there may be more helpful content in my book, Photography Simplified. If you would like a visual beginner's guide to photography, check out my book, Photography Simplified, available in both paperback and ebook format on Amazon. The book covers topics including exposure and the exposure triangle, sharpness and focus, gear, composition, editing, and more. It even includes a list of beginner tips. There are helpful graphics to explain each of the topics that are covered in the book. I've put a lot of work into this book to include everything I wish I could have known when I started out. If you think the book could be helpful to you and haven't already, check the link in the description for more information. Okay, back to the question, which file type should you shoot in? And the answer being it depends. Here's my recommendation. If you're going to be shooting lots of images and doing minimal editing, for example, it may be something like a family vacation where you're just snapping tons of candid pictures. They're not going to be necessarily going up on your wall as fine art, but memories, that type of thing where you're capturing a lot, you're not doing a lot of editing. JPEG can be great for this type of thing. Just make sure that you expose your scenes correctly and have the white balance that you want. However, if you want to be shooting breathtaking landscapes, creating fine art to hang on your walls, I recommend shooting RAW, especially if you plan on editing your images. This will allow you to do the post-processing, the editing you want to turn them into the pictures you want to hang on your wall. So if you plan on editing the pictures, shoot in RAW. If you're just going to do very, very minimal or no editing at all, I would shoot in JPEG. And the reason I say if you're going to edit, shoot in RAW comes down to the things that you can change. A RAW image is capturing all that data and gives you much more freedom when editing the photo. Let's look at some examples of when that applies. Okay, so as far as some examples go, here I have a JPEG and a RAW from the same location, and we're going to look at how there's a difference when you try and save things like your blown out highlights or your underexposed shadows. So I purposely photographed towards the sun here. You can see it's very, very bright. And this first image is the RAW image. And if I bring those highlights all the way down, I can basically bring back everything in the sky except for the sun itself. Now, in contrast, on the JPEG, if I bring those highlights all the way down, it doesn't look quite right, and I can't get back quite as much. Now let's look at the dark shadows. Let's look at right here in the foreground. If I increase the shadows all the way, I can pretty much get those all back. They don't look too noisy. They do look noisy, but not too bad. And this looks more or less natural. Now, the JPEG, if I increase those shadows, you can see that the colors look a little bit off. And if I go in, there's a lot of color noise. It's adding a lot, you can see like right here and through here, these weird color hues. And so just comparing those two side by side, we have our RAW now on the right and the JPEG on the left. And you can see that the JPEG, once it's been tweaked so much, it looks a little strange, and the RAW looks more natural. And that just means if you're going to be editing your photos, shoot in RAW to give yourself more freedom to save things like your highlights and your shadows and to make more adjustments. Now, another example where this is important is in the white balance. I've purposely photographed this image using the incorrect white balance. So you can see it's very cold and blue. This is not how it should have been. And the nice thing is if I shot in RAW, I've captured all that data. So even though it's in the wrong white balance, I can come here, change this to auto, and it's as if I didn't mess up at all. It completely corrects the white balance of this image. And this is what it looks like to my natural eye. I can even come up, bring those highlights down, maybe try and save that sky a little bit. It was a pretty hazy day anyway. But look at the contrast when I try and fix the JPEG. Here on the JPEG, if I come to white balance and I do auto, you can see there's still these weird color tones through the image. It's kind of purple and blue and just looks a little faded. I can come and try and fix those highlights like I did on the RAW. And now let's compare those two. the RAW on the left and the JPEG on the right, look at the difference here. You can see that the RAW, we were able to totally bring back to what it looked like. And the JPEG just looks a little unnatural and wrong. So if you're going to be editing your photos and you want that freedom to adjust and tweak and fix things when you edit, shoot in RAW. If you're shooting something and you feel like you've exposed it well, you've got the right settings, and you don't want to make a bunch of tweaks, you can stick with the JPEG. Now, if you're wondering, how do I change these things on my camera so I know whether I'm shooting in RAW or I'm shooting in JPEG? Let me show you really quickly how to do that. Okay, as far as how to change on your camera the image type, go to your menu. On my Canon camera, I'm going to go to the camera and image quality, hit OK, and here I can choose RAW, medium, or small, and then normal, which would be large. And then I can do same for JPEG, and there's different quality types. So in this case, I have it set on RAW. If I go like this and set it to JPEG, now it's only going to shoot JPEG large. If I have both on, it will shoot both a RAW and a JPEG. So you can have it shoot both at the same time, and it'll just do two of the exact same image, one in RAW and one in JPEG. So if I want my camera to be on just RAW, I can leave it like that. If I want it to be on just JPEG, I can leave it like that. Hopefully this video has been helpful to you and you have a better idea of when to shoot in RAW or when to shoot in JPEG. We'll see you in the next one.